If you search up 2013 president, nearly everything on page 1 is to do with the re-election of Barack Obama, as he was sworn in again after defeating Mitt Romney in 2012. Yet as you scroll down, you'll find that the second last result is a small BBC article titled Xi Jinping named President of China. Let me tell you, this is far more important than Barack Obama gaining re-election. You see, like Obama, in November 2012, Xi Jinping won an election. But instead of being elected by the entire nation, he was elected by the Communist Party Central Committee to be the General Secretary of China, effectively the highest position of government. And then as Obama was being sworn in 2013, the Chinese National Congress, and for Commonwealth viewers that's their equivalent of Parliament, elected Xi Jinping as their President of Congress. That's basically a rite of passage for the General Secretary. And in the same way that Obama branded himself on hope and change, Xi himself promised a new China. In his first speech as General Secretary, Xi argued that the common man in China was owed a better income, a better job, a more sustainable environment, but most importantly, he argued that if the Chinese Communist Party was to survive, it had to purge corruption at all costs. The greatest corruption crackdown in the history of China was about to unfold.
Hello there.
Okay, so we're just about up to the present day with our History of China series, and today we finally start looking at China under Xi Jinping. And it's at this point that we'll stop following a chronological view on China and instead look at each of Xi's main policies in separate videos. And while we're doing the housekeeping, do make sure to subscribe so that you become an expert in all things modern China. It's free to do. And so almost immediately after becoming the president of China in 2013, Xi launched his campaign against corruption. Now, this is a pretty standard thing for a new president to do. Both Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin had done this, and it usually involved removing lower-level party members from opposing factions until they'd consolidated enough power to back off. And so this was what many in the Communist Party were expecting of Xi, but they quickly realised that this campaign was going to be far bigger because Xi outlined the need to target both flies, who are low-ranking officials, but also tigers, who are the higher-ranking officials in the party. That's a little bit of an oversimplification, but it's basically the difference. Now, when understanding Xi's anti-corruption campaign, there's two perspectives on this. Number one, Xi genuinely wanted to rid the party of corruption, but number two, that it was purely so that Xi could purge his political rivals. We're going to contend that neither of these are really true, and that the reality is actually a little bit more nuanced. And so firstly, starting at the fly level, aka local government officials, corruption was absolutely rampant. Now, this mainly occurred through bribery when businessmen bribed the local cadre to turn a blind eye to them breaking regulations, or in cases of nepotism, and for this I'll use Christopher Johnson's example of, say, the son of a local cadre drunk driving his Ferrari, killing 3 people and then basically receiving no punishment. Sometimes the two went hand in hand when a cadre would pay off a more senior official to be promoted to a higher position above someone else. And so Xi recognised that this fly-level corruption was fastly making people disgruntled about the Communist Party, that it was economically costly to have officials pocketing money when China's growth was slowing, and that ultimately if people kept bribing their way up the ladder, China was bound to be run by some pretty incompetent people who didn't get their job on merit. And so, as Kerry Brown puts it, the campaign drew blood really quickly. In 2014, the year following Xi's inauguration, there were 71,000 disciplinary cases, of which 23,000 resulted in charges. And since 2014, more than 100,000 people have been indicted for corruption. Again, this sort of anti-corruption drive is expected of a president in their first year, but certainly not 7 years on. It's also important to note that the anti-corruption drive made Xi extremely popular with the common folk in China. Having seen a different set of rules applied to those within the party, Xi's purge and indeed indictment of corrupt local officials did a lot to win back those disgruntled with the party. This quite populist move was met with opposition within the party though. Some even argued that targeting corruption would result in economic loss for China, as cadres were the biggest purchasers in the luxury goods industry. And so when we look at the anti-corruption campaign at the fly level, there's actually little evidence that suggests that this was a power grab on Xi's part. There was a real need to address China's corruption issue, and targeting such small fish hasn't really done much to strengthen Xi's position. Alternatively, when we move to the tiger level, it's actually a little bit of a different story. The fact that Xi has gone after tigers is another way that his campaign is different to the ones that came before, and there is some evidence that suggests that at the tiger level, Xi at least has some political motivation. Under Xi Jinping, the number of tigers arrested has doubled, and very few of them are Xi's tigers. Now, I'd love to be able to quantify this with a number, but unfortunately no one carries a membership card that says, "I'm from Xi Jinping's faction." I will though refer to the case of Zhou Yongkang, who was so significant in Chinese politics, he was in the Politburo Standing Committee and was a major power broker within the party. And so Zhou retired from the Politburo in November 2012, but was denied the right to choose his successor after he was a supporter of Bo Xilai, who had been arrested on bribery and embezzlement charges. The following year, the New Look Politburo held a 4-day-long conference to discuss whether to investigate Zhou on similar charges. Now, the Politburo opted to proceed with an investigation, and this was unprecedented. No corruption investigation had ever gone for someone as high as the 9th most powerful person in the party. Xi also consulted with former presidents Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, both of which eventually voiced their support for the investigation, though Jiang Zemin's arm needed a bit of twisting. And so Zhou was arrested and was held in a military base in Inner Mongolia and was found guilty of receiving 130 million yuan in bribes, while his son made more than $1.6 billion from public works in Chongqing as an oil and gas executive. Now, state television actually filmed Zhou pleading guilty with now grey hair, he'd previously had it dyed black, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Now, this not only eliminated a rival, but it allowed Xi to fill his place with someone who owed their position to Xi. And so if we draw back to our question we asked at the start, is the anti-corruption campaign a power grab? Well, it might actually be. Going after tigers and replacing them with officials loyal to Xi has helped strengthen his position and re-centralise the party, but at the same time, whatever his motive may be, this also is a very wise move for the trajectory of China. In the 2010s, China couldn't afford to have money leaking into the hands of wealthy cadres. And if China does indeed want to become the world's superpower, then having corrupt officials rise to the top over proven competent officials goes against the vision. And then lastly, China's a country of nearly 1.5 billion people. And as was seen in the 20th century, a disgruntled populace could mean the end of a Chinese regime. The West may be right, and I want to stress the word may be right in saying that President Xi's campaign was a power grab. But the West is certainly wrong in neglecting the fact that this was very much needed in the Middle Kingdom and very much needed for the future of China. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe so that you become an expert in all things modern China. Next week in Enemies of the West, we're looking at Kim Jong-un, and then afterwards we'll be looking at the Belt and Road Initiative in the 2010s. We can't wait to see you next time for our next venture into a fascinating part of history.